unique trip to France. We're really excited about it. We would say it's handcrafted by Father, but open to anyone. We know a lot of people from the state of Indiana are interested in this because of the connections to Indiana, but it is really open to anybody that wants to see our American roots there in France, seeing the saints who made the United States what it is, who brought the Catholic faith to America, seeing them in kind of their homeland of France, seeing what influenced them in France to better understand how they brought the faith to America. So just a really fascinating, beautiful itinerary that's going to some off the beaten path cities in France, but then also hitting, of course, the highlight, which is Paris. You know, when you go to France, everyone's going to be like, "Did you go to Paris?" And we will be spending time in Paris as well. So in today's webinar, I'm just briefly going to do some introductions, introduce you to Verso Ministries, the pilgrimage company putting this on. We'll be looking at the highlights. I'll kind of do a little dive into some of these saints that you'll be meeting on this trip. We'll look at the itinerary and where you'll be headed. And then we'll cover at the very end the package and pricing, and then have time for questions if people have them. I want to start with prayer as we start all things here at Verso, praying through the intercession of our patron at Verso, Pier Giorgio Fossati, in preparation for a pilgrimage, whether or not you're going on this pilgrimage, whether or not you are looking at some other pilgrimage, whether or not you're even traveling, we are all on a pilgrimage of life. And so hopefully some of the themes of this prayer will remind you of that and remind you that we are all pilgrims on our way to heaven. And if you live life with that in mind, your life is given that meaning and that understanding, even in difficulty. You know, maybe you're just going through a rough spot in your pilgrimage, and we're going to turn around and there's going to be a beautiful vista when you get on the other side. So let's pray together in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord, as we embark upon this pilgrimage together, guide my steps. While I cannot anticipate every twist and turn ahead, I trust that you will lead me and strengthen me, inviting me to discover beauty in ways I cannot imagine. Give me the eyes to see your presence, the ears to hear your voice, and an open heart ready to learn from each person, place, and story that I encounter. Help me to look beyond myself and discover the world as you see it. Draw me closer to those around me. Encourage me to slow down, to let go of needless worry. Let my mind wander and my heart wonder at the unexpected, often ordinary ways you find me. With this next step, no matter how small, meek, and humble, I show you my desire and my commitment, despite my imperfections, to answer your call, to come, follow me, to thirst after truth, justice, and love, and ultimately to always find my path back to you, my eternal home. Through the intercession of Blessed Pier Giorgio Fossati, give me the strength, courage, and trust to discover everything that you have in store for me in this life and the next. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. So just to do some introductions before I jump into the itinerary and a little intro into what this trip is all about. My name is Joan Watson. I'm the Pilgrim Formation Manager here at Verso Ministries. And my joy, my honor is to accompany pilgrims who are going on our pilgrimages before, during, and after with spiritual, intellectual, logistical preparation. And so Verso Ministries is one of the few, if not the only pilgrimage company that has somebody full-time in this formation piece. My background is in theology and history. I worked for over 10 years, close to 12 years in diocesan ministry. And I have always had a love for encountering God in travel, encountering God on that pilgrimage journey. And so this was a natural fit for me to come to Verso and really accompany our pilgrims through things like preparation emails, some self-led retreats that have been developed, booklets when you're on your pilgrimage to help you reflect on those places. And so my job here at Verso is to help form you, to get you ready for that pilgrimage, and then to also provide resources while you're on the pilgrimage. Because as we'll see, a pilgrimage is not the same as a vacation. And so you want to make sure you prepare your mind and your heart, your soul, to be open to what the Lord wants to do on this pilgrimage journey. And that's something we really value at Verso. We are not a Catholic tourist company, but we really believe that we are a ministry helping you encounter Christ on pilgrimage. Another important part of our team is our support team. So Trisha in Pilgrim Support is there to accompany pilgrims with their logistical needs. And so when you sign up for a Verso trip, we don't leave you high and dry. In this trip, for example, airfare isn't included. And so we want to help answer those questions and kind of ease some of that so that we can make the pilgrimage journey as logistically easy for you as possible so that you can really concentrate on that spiritual experience of encountering Christ. Okay. Doesn't this picture just make you want to go to France right now and
Oh,
just walk there? Like it's so exciting. It's been really fun to make some of these slides because France is so gorgeous, so beautiful, and this trip kind of highlights that. Your pilgrimage leader and chaplain for this particular itinerary is Father Eric, who's a priest of the Archdiocese of Indianapolis. He handcrafted, as I mentioned at the beginning, this itinerary himself with a love for these holy men and women that so often get overlooked. A lot of times, you think of the big saints of France and you forget these little heroes that were amazing witnesses of the faith that brought the faith then through their work, either directly or indirectly, brought the faith to America. So he knows these saints well, he loves them, and he handcrafted this itinerary. Again, open to everybody, not just those people from Indiana who have other connections to some of these people. Verso Ministries, as I mentioned, is a Catholic pilgrimage company. We really believe that our mission is to facilitate those encounters with Jesus Christ while on pilgrimage. We pride ourselves in being a small company that is able to do things like these handcrafted itineraries that you might not find in other companies, and that we accompany our pilgrims even if we can't physically go on every trip. Right? That's not possible. I wish I could go on every trip, but we accompany them in various ways, especially by supporting them with our support team and with these resources. We are experts in both ministry and travel. So most of our team has that background in ministry. We either worked for campus ministry on a college. As I mentioned, I worked in diocesan ministry. Many of us worked in parish ministry, so that we are able to bring that pilgrimage formation aspect to the trip. We don't think this is the same as simply a Catholic vacation, but that our view is that there really is this pilgrimage encounter with the living God. The amazing thing about this itinerary is that, as I mentioned at the beginning, you really will discover that French Catholic heritage that is in our country. The men and women that you will meet really sewed Catholicism into the very fabric of our society. We don't live in a Catholic culture by any means. We barely live in a Christian culture these days, right? But I think we overlook sometimes the richness that some of these men and women brought to our founding, to our country. And as we approach, July 4th at the end of this week, we can celebrate that these men and women worked very hard to bring Catholicism to our country, especially because the men and women that we will meet today grew up and were formed at a time of anti-Catholicism in France. Many of them have direct connections and direct experiences of the vicious, violent, anti-Catholic history of the French Revolution and the Reign of Terror. So we will go and hear their stories. We will walk in their footsteps. We will pray at their tombs and really be inspired by the way God works through all things, right? Romans 8. God works all for good for those who love him. And so even out of something as awful and terrible, violent, evil, demonic as the French Revolution, we have these saints coming. Grace comes all the more, right, out of these times of darkness. And that grace overflows not just in France, but overflows to our own shores here in America. Here at Verso, when we look at the idea of pilgrimage, we really want to emphasize that you are different as a pilgrim than a tourist. It doesn't mean that this pilgrimage won't be wonderful. It doesn't mean that you won't have fun, that you won't drink a good glass of French wine, you won't eat good food, you won't take pictures, right? It doesn't mean that you won't do these things, but that you're going with this idea of encountering the living God in these places. And so on the outside, you will look like a tourist because you will be going on a bus to these various places. You will be taking pictures. You will be encountering this beauty, like the Chartres Cathedral, but you will be going as a pilgrim. You will be seeking to find the Lord in these places. And that's something we really try to emphasize in our formation and in the way we approach travel as a company. That's why we see ourselves as Verso Ministries. And so when we approach a pilgrimage, again, we approach it with that idea that you want to prepare. You want to prepare your heart and your mind to receive what the Lord has for you. Then you want to reflect on it afterwards. And so I always follow up with 2 emails after you get back to help you reflect on your journey. We believe in a contemplative pace. You're going to see some beautiful places in France, but you're not going to see the whole country, because we would rather you see a few places really well than be overwhelmed and not even remember any of the places you saw because you were checking them off your bucket list. But you'll be going with that contemplative pace to be able to really pray at these sites and encounter these saints. Let's look now at the itinerary, because this is a really particularly handcrafted itinerary. You're going to see some beautiful cities in France. You're going to experience some amazing French countryside. You're going to touch French history in such a beautiful way. So it'll be a total of 10 days, 9 nights. And we're looking at the beginning of October to go meet these people in the eldest daughter of the church. That's what France is nicknamed, the eldest daughter of the faith, because of her rich Catholic history. There's an overview of the itinerary, but I'm going to go day by day into some of these cities, which may sound obviously foreign. It's France, but it may sound unfamiliar to you, some of these places. Why are we going to Rennes? Why are we going to places that I have trouble even pronouncing? But why are we going to Le Mans, right? Why are we going to some of these cities I've never heard of, these towns, these hamlets? But because we're going to go encounter the people whose stories are there and whose tombs might be there. So day 1, the journey begins. You will depart from the United States and you will meet up on day 2 in Paris. So you're flying in and out of the major airport there in Paris. This trip is very customizable. If you find yourself somewhere else and you need to get to Paris on some other way, we can help that happen. So everyone is converging on day 2 in Paris. So you'll arrive in Paris, you'll check into the hotel, and you'll have a welcome mass to really set the stage for this moment, and a welcome dinner, right? So you'll begin in Paris, but the majority of your time in Paris is actually going to be at the end of your trip. So you'll get a little taste of Paris that first night before you depart that day 3. So really the second full day of the trip, really the first full day of the trip, right? Because you've come in, you left your home, you landed, now you began your trip together. And now on this first full day, you will leave and you will go to Chartres, the famous Chartres Cathedral, which has been a place of pilgrimage for so many years. Originally, of course, a walking pilgrimage destination, right? People would walk to Chartres. Chartres is also the place where people often would depart from to go to places like Santiago de Compostela on the Camino in Spain. So Chartres is such a beautiful hub. You know, in the French countryside, you just see that amazing cathedral rising up. That amazing stained glass. It's such a stunning testament to the faith of the rural French, the faith of those people who built this amazing pilgrimage site. You will then travel to Le Mans, and your full day in Le Mans will be the following day. So this day is kind of definitely a pilgrimage day where you'll be traveling through that part of northern France. Day 4, you will be in Le Mans. And at Le Mans, that's the birthplace of the Congregation of the Holy Cross. Now, those of you who are familiar with the University of Notre Dame, the Congregation of Holy Cross founded the University of Notre Dame. And it's a beautiful, beautiful city, a historic city. And we find it on the banks of a very famous river. There's actually a inner city there that's historic and that is built between the 3rd and 4th centuries. It's surrounded by a wall. And so there's this kind of historic inner city, the city Plantagenet, which has kind of these historic, it was Roman. And so it has these historic cobbled streets, what they would call half-timbered houses, which are, you will see those both in Rennes and here, very, very typical old French houses. And this inner city of Le Mans, the city of Plantagenet, is so famous that it actually is used for a lot of TV and movies as a set things like The Man in the Iron Mask. It was the set of those movies because it's so historic, and just such a beautiful piece of French history. So Le Mans in and of itself is beautiful and historic, but it also, as I mentioned, is the place that where the Congregation for Holy Cross was born. And so we'll look at that as well. But Father Moreau was one of our holy men that we will meet and women that we will meet. And like so many people in this time, he was really formed and affected by the French Revolution. So Father Moreau was born in 1799 near Le Mans, really affected by the upheaval that the French Revolution caused. And when the French Revolution tried to eradicate Catholicism from France, they imprisoned priests, they massacred priests, they tried to completely erase Catholicism and therefore left this gap where once the French Revolution kind of died down, we have this gap where there's no spiritual formation, there's no education, Catholic schools are closed. And so Basil Moreau wanted to fill that gap. He was ordained in 1821 and eventually organized a group of priests that traveled around the dioceses to just try to assist at parishes to help with formation. He was asked to oversee a group of brothers, eventually named them after the town where they were based, St. Croix, St. Holy Cross, and they named themselves then Congregation of Holy Cross. And so you will tour this beautiful city, but you will also have mass at the home of the shrine of Basil Moreau. Holy Cross, of course, is a huge religious order that would go forth preaching parish missions, educating people, being missionaries in Algiers and the United States and Italy and Canada and Bengal and Poland. And so really spread throughout trying to educate people in this gap when people didn't know the faith. Okay. There's brothers, there's sisters, there's priests of Holy Cross. And so you'll be going to this historic place, but then also touching the Catholicism there as well. The Cathedral of St. Julian there is one of the largest cathedrals in France, 12th century stained glass. The window of the Ascension in that cathedral is the oldest stained glass in the world, still in place in a cathedral. And so you'll get a touch of that beauty, that history, both the Catholic history, but then also even just the sacred history, the secular history. When we look at things like the wall that was built between the 3rd and 4th centuries, just that remarkable preserved area of the city that will take you back in time, like going into a little time capsule. You'll have your overnight there will be in Le Mans, so you get to explore a little bit more in that French history. And then the next day, you will travel to this little town called Rouy-Saint-Roi. Rouy-sur-Loire is the home of the mother house of the Sisters of Providence. So again, another religious order founded as a response to the French Revolution, when religious practice is banned, churches are secularized, seminaries closed, the religious and priests are executed. A priest rose up in 1806. He was ordained in secret in the midst of this, in the midst of the Reign of Terror. Then he rose up in 1806 after the French Revolution died down a bit and said, I need to educate the poor. I need to serve the poor. And so he founded the Sisters of Providence to serve and educate the poor. By 1840, there were more than 40 houses in France of these sisters. And a group of them in 1840, traveled to America with Theodore Guerin. Theodore Guerin, that name might be familiar to you. Mother Theodore Guerin is one of the few American saints. So she was born in France, but came to America, educated girls in Indiana, and is now Saint Mother Theodore Guerin, is now buried in Indiana. But you will be going and visiting her mother house. You will also continue to travel to Rennes. Rennes is the place where Simon Brute, who's the first bishop of Vincennes, Indiana, was baptized, and the place where Mother Theodore Guerin taught. So such a rich Catholic history here. Simon Brute is one of those heroes of American Catholicism that many people don't even know his name. He grew up, as you can imagine, in the midst of the French Revolution, the horrors of the French Revolution. He was 13 when Leo the 16th was guillotined. So he was a teenager during this reign of terror where priests were just taken wholesale and just massacred, where Notre Dame Cathedral was desecrated, when they tried to eradicate religion and tried to eradicate Catholicism from France. Simon's growing up as a teenager. His mother actually hid priests in her home for a time. And so his mother really worked hard to distill the faith in the life of Simon and his brothers. Simon eventually went to medical school, but eventually was called to seminary and wanted to really serve the religious needs that had been, again, just completely affected by this pagan, demonic French Revolution. So he enters the seminary. He eventually comes to America and has quite a career in America as a priest. Teaches at Mount St. Mary's Seminary, which you might be familiar with, is in Maryland, just outside Emmitsburg, Maryland. He teaches at Mount St. Mary's Seminary, still a seminary today, still educating priests. And he became the spiritual director of St. Elizabeth Ann Seton, our first American saint. So Simon Brute John Adams called Simon Brute the most learned man in America. So he was well known at the time for being a brilliant man, but dedicating his life again to education and serving the Catholic community. So he was Elizabeth Ann Seton's spiritual director, eventually became president of St. Mary's in Baltimore, and would eventually become Bishop of Vincennes, Indiana, after serving as the theological consultant to the Council of Baltimore, which you might be familiar coming out of the Baltimore Catechism. So just such a brilliant, beautiful witness of Catholicism. After he witnessed the horrors of the French Revolution, he realizes he has to serve the Lord, and his whole mission becomes educating and serving the church, and comes to America to do that. So you will be meeting him on this trip as well. He's actually buried in Vincennes, Indiana. His cause for canonization is up in the Vatican. From there, you'll take a day trip on day 6 to Étaux-sur-Mer, which is by the sea. That's what sur-mer means. And that's the home of Theodore Guerin, who I've already introduced you to. And with a stop at St. Pern, which is the mother house of the Little Sisters of the Poor. Some of you might be familiar with the Little Sisters of the Poor because that's a religious community in many American cities that serve the elderly who cannot care for themselves any longer and who cannot afford to care for themselves. To make a long story short, St. Jean Jugan grew up in the midst of the French Revolution. Her father was lost at sea, and she grew up in poverty, and her mother secretly instructed them in the faith. At 18, she declined all marriage proposals and told her mother that her God was calling her to a work which is not yet founded. That work that God was calling her to was eventually caring for the elderly, especially the elderly poor. She began the Little Sisters of the Poor to serve those who could not help themselves, either because of poverty or because of she actually just welcomed the elderly into her own home for a while. So she was taking care of the blind and the paralyzed in her own home. She eventually began the Little Sisters of the Poor, wrote a rule of life, and more than 100 women joined her in less than 10 years. One of the tragic parts of Jean Jugan's life is that in 1850, she was forced out of leadership in her own community by the priest that the bishop had put in charge of the community. And the priest assigned her to do nothing but beg on the streets. So that at the time of her death, where there were houses of Little Sisters of the Poor in France and in England and in the United States, there were 2,400 sisters. Many of them didn't even know that Jean Jugan was their foundress. And she died in this humility. She died giving her mission over to someone else. Eventually, she was rehabilitated, of course. The church recognized her holiness. The church recognized that she was foundress of this community, and she's been canonized. But we will stop and be there at the original mother house of the sisters and be able to pray with her, to ask her intercession for us, for our country, and for the sisters that continue to serve in our country today. Your overnight that night will be in Rennes, which is another beautiful historic French city. Many people haven't even heard of Rennes, which is a tragedy. It's really an eclectic city with a lot of history, kind of artsy. It's kind of laid back in a French way, so it's not going to be as busy as Paris. But they talk about how you can see every layer of French history in Rennes, that there's a lot of Art Deco architecture, but then there's great restaurants, there's local markets, there's festivals. There's also a very state-of-the-art, like 21st century metro and transportation system. So they said like all the layers of history, you have those half timbered houses that we saw in Le Mans. There's just a lot of history and beauty and French culture in Rennes. And so we want to make sure you have that contemplative pace to really enjoy that French way of life. Day 8, then we travel back up to Paris, and the pilgrimage ends in the City of Lights in beautiful Paris, where we will continue to meet these famous holy men and women, having a visit to St. Vincent de Paul's chapel. St. Vincent de Paul, the great defender of the poor. He spent his life serving the poor. Just around the corner from St. Vincent de Paul's chapel is the Miraculous Medal Chapel, where Our Lady appeared to Catherine Labouré, giving her that medal, that what has become known as the Miraculous Medal because of all the cures, the miracles, the conversions that happened through it. But Our Lady appears to Catherine Labouré on several occasions, gave her the Miraculous Medal, and you can pray in that chapel. You can see the chair that Our Lady sat in that first night when Catherine was brought into the chapel by her guardian angel and knelt there, and Our Lady held her hands and spoke to her. You can see the chair to this day. I've been there. You can still feel the presence of Our Lady there in that chapel where she had that intimate encounter with Catherine. And so you'll spend the day in Paris seeing all these incredible things. You will have time to explore. Father Eric loves the city. He will be there to give tips and help you find your way to the parts of Paris that you want to see. Day 9, you'll still be in Paris. You'll have mass actually at the place where Simon Brute was ordained. You'll have tours of Notre Dame. As you know, Notre Dame was reopened in December after the terrible fire. It's been restored. It looks a lot like it looked when we first built it, rather than over the years with the candles and the people and the smoke and the pollution really made the inside very dark, and now it's been restored. So you'll have the unique opportunity to experience Notre Dame freshly restored. This beautiful chapel, one of my favorite places in Paris, Sainte-Chapelle, built by Saint King Louis to house the crown of thorns. People have described it as a music box, a jewel box. It's this relatively small chapel that is absolutely incredibly stunning. If you could tell from the picture, full of stained glass. You actually enter down below, and you walk up, and you're just struck by the incredible beauty. And to realize that it was built as a reliquary. It was built to house, its sole purpose is to house this incredible relic of the crown of thorns that King Louis brought back from the Holy Land. And so Paris will really be kind of that ending joyful. You'll have your farewell dinner. You'll have time to explore the city, kind of be the crowning jewel. There's so much to see in Paris. So there is always the opportunity too, if you want to stay and add a day to your trip and stay and see more like not Santa Croce. I'm stuck in Italy here. Sacré Coeur up on the hill, the Eiffel Tower. There's so much to see. The Louvre, the Orsay. There's so much to see in Paris, and so you'll have some time to explore as well. Then day 10, you will depart out of the Paris airport and go on your way. Just to wrap up, I want to look at package pricing, and then I'm happy to answer any questions. Again, for those of you watching the recording, because many of people reached out and said they couldn't come live, they wanted me to record it, they wanted me to send it out. So for those of you who are watching the recording, know that we're able to answer any of your questions at any time. Go ahead and give us a call here at Verso. Shoot us an email at hello@versoministries.com, and we're happy to answer any of those questions. So the package includes Father Eric will be there, and so he'll have daily mass. It's going to be a very prayerful, beautiful pilgrimage, but also really fun. So great restaurants, meals that are included are marked on the itinerary. The more detailed itinerary can be found on our website. I will give you that direct link in a minute. So all your transportation there in country, all tickets to any included activities, all of that's included. As I mentioned, all your formation will be included. The thing that is not included is your airfare. And so we did this on purpose to make it a little more flexible for those people coming from various cities. We knew not everyone was going to be coming from Indianapolis, and we can help you if you need some advice. We tell you, okay, shoot for getting into Paris at this time, leaving at this time, and so that everybody can go to and from the airport together. But if you want to come in earlier, leave later, we have that flexibility as well. So that includes everything that was just on that slide for the package can be, that's the package price right there, $42.98. If you want a single room, if you need travel insurance, all of that is an additional cost, and we can walk through that as well. Your next step is, if you're interested in registering, that is the direct link to register on our website. But then also just know that we are here to answer more questions. So if there's something holding you back from this trip, we are happy to talk through options, to talk through some of those hurdles that maybe you may want to see something that's not on the itinerary. How can we make that happen? You're not sure, like if you maybe you're looking for a roommate, how can we make that happen? So know that we're here to answer your questions, to help make this pilgrimage a reality. It really is such a unique opportunity to see parts of France that most pilgrims never see. And that's what I love about some of these trips, is that these places will be much quieter, much more prayerful, very peaceful, in a way that maybe some other destinations where everybody's going, there's a lot of tourists, that you won't have kind of that real touch of French culture. That's what I think is really neat about this trip, is that you're really going to be touching French culture. You're going to see the towns where people are living and going about their daily lives. And so really experiencing France, not just what a tourist book tells you to experience, right? You're not going to just experience what you might see on a Rick Steves show. You're really going to see France for the goodness of that Catholic culture that has survived, even when it was the French Revolution tried to eradicate it. At its heart, France is still that eldest daughter of the church, and we need to pray for that, and we need to work for that, both in France and in our own country. I don't know if there are any questions. Again, for those of you watching the recording, feel free to email us, to call us with any questions you might have. But if anybody here has questions, I'm happy to answer them right now before we wrap up. Okay. Well, I don't see any in the chat either. So just know that we're here to answer any questions. We're here to help if you need help registering. And we would love to have you join Father Eric on this really, really unique trip, this really beautifully handcrafted experience of France and the holy men and women that helped shape our United States. So our website's versoministries.com. You'll find the departure there. I will be sending out this recording. I will also be sending out these slides so you can kind of get an overview again of the itinerary. You can get that link to register, and would just be happy to welcome you on this beautiful trip and this beautiful experience of France. So God bless. Thanks so much for joining us.